So y'all, this is Billy Ennis. He was a 2016 and 2019 USOPC Developmental Coach of the Year. The former junior program manager for USA Cycling. He has 9 world championships as director sportif of the USA National Junior.
Just 2.
Okay, sorry.
9 medals.
Okay, 9 medals. Okay, and personal coach for lots of multiple junior U.S. national championships. Did I get all that right?
I think so.
Okay. He's very accomplished. He's a super awesome rider himself, and he's going to talk to us about his juniors team.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good to see everybody. Yeah, Amy, that was a great introduction. Thank you very much. Yeah, we only won 2 world championships. Only 2. They're hard to get. Stripes are really, really challenging to earn, and they take a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of training, as you can see here. So this was a training camp. This was taken in Switzerland. This was a training camp after a 4-day Nations Cup stage race. I decided to have a training camp in Switzerland because I really like Switzerland, and the guys really liked it. And it was a lot of fun. That's just outside of Gstaad. That was about 140K day that we did in the mountains and about 8,500 feet of climbing, I think, give or take. So it was a good day. It was a very good day. Uh-oh, let's see if this works.
I can do it.
Okay, you can do it for me.
Up was the next one.
Yeah.
I think
Page
up.
down.
Page down or page up? Oh, it's frozen. Frozen in Switzerland, everybody. Which is really not a bad place to be honest with you. It's actually really not. Very expensive, but not a bad place. Do you want me to try it on the screen?
Yeah.
Let's see if this one works.
It'll unfreeze and put the last one.
And then we'll go through like 18 slides. Yeah.
No.
Anybody have any questions so far that I already started? Well, I can do a little background on me just in case you guys don't think I'm just some knucklehead that coaches some people. I raced for a really long time. I grew up in Queens, New York. And thank you.
Yeah.
I grew up in Queens, New York. Was a professional for 1 year. I raced on a MAPE amateur team based out of Hungary. MAPE was really smart. Those of you that know MAPE, it was a huge team back in the day, and they had satellite amateur teams all around the world. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to race for one of them, raced in Italy a lot, suffered, got my head kicked in, learned a lot of things, raced Little Masters, got this job at USA Cycling, which I was really thankful for, and ran the national team for 10 years. Won a lot of stuff, lost a lot of stuff, had about 130 athletes come through my program, and about 35 have turned pro since then, multiple world champions, lots of medals and everything like that. This slide is the junior athletic development pathway from Belgium, because we couldn't come up with one here in our country. So this is from a 65-page Belgian manual about what to do with juniors. We don't have that. We had to make it up, or I had to steal it. But this is their pathway. And you can see that things get very serious as they get older, not when they're 13 years old. 13, 14, 15, 16, racing is fun. It should always be fun. No one should be doing 4x20s at 14 years old. Nobody. How many of you work with juniors? Or how many of you have coached juniors or work with juniors? So not so many. But everyone starts as a junior usually, right? Or you come into the sport later. But you have to give them time, and it has to be fun. There are a lot of juniors that are racing now here in the Bay Area, and it's really exciting to see. But if they're being coached incorrectly, things go really pear-shaped really, really quickly. So it's important to realize that learning to win comes much later. All these things have to develop in time, but it has to be fun to begin with. I'm going to try, you're going to try. We're going for it. Perfect. Athlete identification, one of my favorite things. I love athlete ID. I ran the talent ID camp every year for USA Cycling for 10 years. And I brought in the best athletes to one place. And we were trying to determine this. Is this a Venn diagram? Is that a Venn? I don't even know. I didn't go to Masters. Thanks, Bill. It's a Venn diagram. Jerome can tell me, I see he's done a TED Talk according to his picture on Zoom. But yes, these are things that make up a good athlete, a really, really good athlete across all athletic disciplines, not just cycling. But cycling is really hard. It's really hard life. I used to joke with the guys that cycling is the Flemish word for suffering. That's what cycling means. And when you race in Belgium, you totally understand. But right there in the middle is high performance, right? And focus, that's a challenging thing for juniors. But a lot of them have passion and a lot of them have physical capacity. A lot of athletes are super, super talented in this country. Massive watts, lots of power, should probably do triathlon because they can't race in a pack, right? So those pack skills have to come and be developed. So here's a question for you. Where do you think juniors lie in this non-Venn diagram pyramid that I love so much? All over that map, or where juniors are? Where do you think masters races are? All over that map. Valverde is probably the best master in the world, and he's all the way in the world tour. But that pyramid is, there are 250 guys in the world tour. That's it. That's the peak, right? But pro Conti, or whatever they call it now, and amateur, it's a huge pyramid across the world. Really, really big. Think of all the athletes in the world. All the guys that ride bikes, all the women that ride bikes. It's a really, really big pyramid. So to get to the top level for juniors, if you're coaching juniors or working with juniors, you have to work with them. What's going to set you apart and what's going to make you better? What's going to get you up to the top? I was really fortunate enough to work with a junior in 2019. We won a world championship, the road race, and he went directly into the world tour. And we're starting to see this now more and more. The U23s have become almost secondary. Juniors have been trained so well and have gotten so good that they're going directly into the world tour. Now, it doesn't happen with everybody, and those are exceptions to the rule, for sure. But there are 4 or 5 almost every year we're going to see now. But some other athletes need time. They need time to develop. So it's really important to give them time to develop these skills. Everyone knows these terms, kind of, in a way, right? Austin's looking at me like, I have no idea what any of this means. Okay, so unconscious incompetence, just ride bikes, no idea what's going on, right? Conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious competence is where we want to go. That's world tour. Those are guys that understand exactly what they need to do at the right time to get their leader to the finish. They don't question it. Not that they don't question it, but they understand the physical demands needed for them to win the bike race, right? Everyone starts down here. Then. I ride bikes. I have no idea what's going on. I did a group ride. What's going on? What's happening, right? And then you start learning, and you learn how things go. And you learn more skills, and you learn, okay, I can attack here, and I can do this. And then now I have to think about it. I'm going to attack at Roubaix. Where am I going to go? Oh, they just let me go in the feed zone. Holy cow, now I'm by myself. I got 60K to go to the finish line. That's exactly what happened that day. And oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? This is painful. But what's one of my favorite pictures on the top right is there's 2 USA guys. Then you have the leader, who's Adrian Costa. From those of you that know from around here, he's from Los Altos. And another rider right behind him on the same size bike in case anything happens to Adrian. And that's the final day of the really, really big stages. I got to the point with that team in 2015 that could happen. Didn't have to say anything. They knew what to do. That's important. For juniors, it's really difficult. It's challenging to do that because they're learning as they go, right? I would say even argue some amateurs. It's really, really challenging, but to create an environment where they can learn. This is a really important slide for me. I should show this at 2 or 3 presentations I would do a year for juniors and other places. Juniors want to be challenged. Young athletes want to be challenged. They enjoy the struggle. They like the struggle. They may not tell you it, but they do because they're earning something as they go. They're learning, they're growing, and they're developing all these skills that'll help them later on, especially if they're passionate about the sport that they do. But it's a struggle. But Lamond recognized it. Lamond is, yeah, he's a little bit Looney Tunes now, but at the time he was really, he understood a lot of things, but he could step back and look at the world of cycling and the things that he was doing. And he was satisfied with the struggle. And it's a challenging thing to explain to a 15, 16, 17-year-old. Like, these are hard times now. They will get easier as you go, but they also, things get, the hardness of the struggle stays the same. You just get faster, right? Thank you. Professionalism was something that I always worked on, especially with you working with the national team. So in the USA, at any given time, usually around nationals. We have about 350 to 360 17, 18-year-old juniors that have raced at least one race in this country. That's it. I was dealing with the top 1%. And so for me to imply or to impress upon them a level of professionalism was very, very important. Professionalism and the fact that you don't never put the USA jersey on the ground. That's a flag. It never goes on the ground. I took away jerseys from riders because they're borrowing the USA jersey. It's not theirs. They're in a line of riders that came before them. They're drafting the riders that came before them. Taylor Phinney, Lawson Craddock, Nate Brown, all the riders you see now. Brandon McNulty came through my program, never a single jersey on the ground. So it's a level of professionalism and respect. I treated it much like the All Blacks, right? You earn the jersey, you borrow it for a little while, and then when you're done, you're done. And when you're done, hopefully we put you up into a program that's professional. So it's really, really important. Small things, all those little tiny things. Oh, did I break it? I said something. I did the wrong. So I move out of the way. Perfect. So preparedness is really important for juniors. Juniors know nothing. They know nothing. They think they do. They think they know everything. They know nothing, right? And so I made a lot of mistakes when I first got this job. I was coming off a professional contract. I had raced for a long time. Super duper master's level here in NorCal, which is like professionals. You know, they treat you professionally. It's really funny. But I expected them to know certain things, and I realized after about a year that they knew nothing. And I had to step back and remember what it was like when I was young. I started racing a little bit late, but I also dabbled in junior racing, but I had no idea what to do. Right? So I made a lot of mistakes. And so I went back to zero with a lot of the juniors. And this is, I'm going to remind you again, like the best athletes we had in the country, but they knew nothing about nothing. Right? So to get them prepared and to have them prepared is really, really important. And cycling is a complex sport. The learning curve is very, very steep. I just did the worst thing. No, I just read what was on the slide, which is like the worst thing for any presentation, but it is. And I want to reiterate that because it's hard. It's really, really challenging. The nuances of the sport are vast, really, really vast. But you have to get them as prepared as possible, right? Recon is really important. I think I'm going to talk about that next. And knowledge and things like that. I broke it again. Oh, there you go. Okay, go back. Go back. One more. Knowledge is power. That's the best slide. One more. Forward. Get there. Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. That's fine. Okay, perfect. This is one of my favorite slides that I just put together last week. My favorite slide ever. So knowledge is power. On the top left there, you see us reconning Roubaix in 2019 for the third time. Now, for those of you who don't understand bicycle racing, I'm going to break it down just a little bit for you. Everything that's not a UCI race is a grassroots race. Everything. That is the top level Nations Cup race for juniors, and it's a classic. It's the morning of Paris-Roubaix. So when you watch Paris-Roubaix on TV, we have already raced and we're already done. A lot of people don't understand that. Wevelgem is the same. It's a classic. We race the same morning as the pros. In fact, Wevelgem has, I believe, 7 UCI races on the same exact day around different courses in and around Belgium. If there's anyone who can put on a bike race, it's Belgium, for sure. But we recon Roubaix quite often. We had to know the nuances of the stones. It's a very, very specific race. It's very, very tactical and very, very equipment hectic, as I would like to say. But we reconned it. And those guys knew everything about that race. On the top right, I forget his name, but this was taken in 2015, I believe, when Sky was still around before it became Ineos. I forget his name, I apologize, but he's a Spanish rider. He was a pro for something like 12 years, and there he is with a camera on his head at Paris-Roubaix. We recon Roubaix the same days the pros do. Here's a pro being paid, I looked him up, he was being paid €1 million a year, and he was still reconning Roubaix with a camera. So if we're doing it, for sure, they're doing it. Or the other way around, but we all do it. All the teams would do it. On the bottom right there's another stage race that we did in Switzerland. Again, in Switzerland, love Switzerland. Recommend moving there if you can. If you have anybody with a passport, get there as soon as possible. That time trial was really, really tricky. So it was a double day, meaning we had a road race in the morning, we had a time trial in the afternoon. They love doing that to juniors at that level. Really, really challenging to do. So we had a 90K road race that finished on top of a mountain, and then we had a time trial in the valley that afternoon. But the time trial was really, really technical. Now, those of us that think that a four-corner crit is technical, I'm going to tell you about this time trial. This time trial had at least 25 turns and literally went through an alleyway between two houses that my team car barely fit through. And then you came out and you had to make a left and you had to get down to the finish. So very, very technical, very, very hilly. We reconned that course probably 4 or 5 times, and we made a decision not to use disc wheels because it was so hilly. It was very, very important. We went 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 7th in the time trial. Every other team dragged around TT bikes, and well, we had TT bikes, but everyone dragged around a disc. Genius, me. But the boys were benefited from that, and we all made the decision as a group. I didn't dictate it. We talked about it. Sat them down, 6 guys, and I said, "What do you guys think?" And everyone's like, "I think a disc brake, I think a disc wheel is heavy." I'm like, "Yep, okay, fine, let's use this." And of course, there was the one kid, we get to the start line, is like, "Do we have discs?" I was like, "Bro, we talked about this." Equipment is really important for juniors. Juniors do not understand how their bikes work. Explain how a hydraulic disc brake works. No idea. Nobody has any idea. Nobody in this room knows how a hydraulic disc brake works. It's Shimano magic. But you do have to understand certain things for juniors to understand like how your bikes work. So bottom left there is a kid who snapped his chain in a kermesse. That was really sad. Really, really nice kid, but his chain completely snapped. I looked and it was his master link. It wasn't put on correctly. And, you know, there's a kid. But the cool thing in Belgium was like he could race the next day. It's no big deal. But if you have special equipment, if you're a parent that buys your son or daughter special equipment, you better understand how that special equipment works because it will break eventually. Juniors are really good at breaking stuff. So it's really important. On the top right there, so this was 2013. That is a 17-year-old kid with lightweight wheels. They're like 5,000 euros each for the set, right? That kid was the first kid dropped on the hill, by the way. I'm not lying to you. Yeah, it was amazing. But, you know, it's like Silicon Valley all over. That's Luxembourg. Is it not working? Did I break it? Yeah, oh yeah, you got it. Thanks. I gave you the wink, man.
Yeah, I'm on it on the next
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay. Time trial bicycles. So at the upper levels, at 17, 18, you have to have time trial bikes that are UCI compliant. It's really, really important, meaning they have to fit into the UCI rules. If you're working with juniors that are going to the upper levels and upper level racing, and even at national championships, which is technically a UCI race, their bikes have to fit into a certain box that the UCI has decided. So it's really, really important. I can't tell you how many times I would go to nationals every single year and a parent would be like, "But the bike shop said it was legal." Let me tell you something. A 17-year-old kid at the bike shop has no idea what the UCI rules are, right? And I would have to sit and explain to this poor parent whose son was not allowed to start the time trial, that his time trial bike, the saddle was basically in front of the stem, and that was illegal, and you couldn't do that. So if you're working with athletes at this level, you have to understand those rules. It's really, really important. If you're 15, 16 or younger, it doesn't matter. But I think if you're working with an athlete that's 15, 16, that's going to become really, really good as a 17, 18-year-old, that is a really good time to get them into the UCI box. That's Bradley Wiggins when he won Worlds that year. Actually, no, he was second that year. Sorry. This was the basic race day kit that I would give to a lot of juniors. Juniors are really good about forgetting stuff. It's totally normal. I used to get kind of ticked off, and then I would just get disappointed, and then it was just sad. We would all sit around and cry that some kid forgot his shoes, and the mechanic had to go drive 200K back to the hotel to bring him and bring him back. That's a real story. I'll tell you that over beers one day. But so this one kid that I worked with, everyone know Matteo Jorgensen in this room? Matteo Jorgensen was second today in the Tour of Britain. Okay, so he was a kid that came through my program. He was a great kid. His older brother was an idiot, really was smart, went to Harvard, but dumb as a bag of rocks, would forget stuff all the time. And so I finally got to work with him, and we sat down and I printed out an Excel spreadsheet, and it had all this on it. And I said, "You're 18 years old. You should not forget your passport when we go to drug control. We should not forget your shoes, all this other stuff." So I printed this out for him, and he was super embarrassed. And I was like, "Don't be embarrassed. This is just something that gets you better. This is not a big deal." I was like, but I can't keep paying the mechanics speeding tickets. Like, I can't keep doing that just because you forget stuff every single time. So this is like the basic. At the bottom, you will notice spare derailleur hanger. Kids crash a lot. So if you go to a bike race, if you're traveling to a bike race and you bring your bike that has super special bits on it, and you're in Canada and there's no bike shop because you're in the middle of Quebec, and you wreck and your derailleur hanger snaps, and you're a kid, what are you gonna do? Well, you're super prepared, so you pull out your spare derailleur hanger because your dad got you one because you asked, because it's only $15. But that saves you the next 3 days of stage racing. Small investment. Nutrition for juniors, very, very tricky subject. I used to be a lot harder on the athletes when I first started. I backed off quite a bit because I realized that they were young. And we would have a lot of discussions about cookies and snacks and special treats. And when you're racing in France, the croissants are unbelievable. So I would try to tell them, okay, eat what you want, just eat in moderation. If you want a cookie, have a couple, please don't have 15. If you really need 15 cookies, that's another discussion we need to talk about because you're probably going to get diabetes. So let's just talk about this. But you're also a lot of athletes recently are allergic to this, allergic to that, gluten-free, whatever it is. And so we would have to make special accommodations on the road, meaning as we're traveling all around Europe, to find gluten-free stuff. Sometimes it's a challenge in Germany, sometimes it's a challenge in other places it's not. So you just have to make special arrangements for that. But if you're an athlete that understands that, that's really important also for the athlete to understand that what they need and to impart that message and to tell us what we need. Oh. Get there. There's one more. We skipped one slide. It's just my second favorite slide. Next one. Go back. That's a good one too. One more. Oh, that was my old Swannier. He slept all the time. It was great. Yeah, he was like a 70-year-old Norwegian guy. Yeah, it was great. He's the best. Oh, now we're going all the way forward. Keep going. You're almost there. Get there. So close. It's laggy. No.
One more.
Keep going. Let's see. I'll go back one. You go back. Sorry, everybody on Zoom. There you go. Time management. Okay. Juniors time management. Kids are great. Can everyone kind of see that? So how kids manage their time. Who has sons and daughters here? Really? Okay, a couple. How's social media time going for them? Yeah, they just sit there on Instagram looking at other people's lives. Right. That's what they do. So if you're cycling and if you're a high level sport and you're working really, really hard, how you manage your time is really, really important. Ask yourself all the time, what are you doing? Right? I think all of us in this room were relatively high performers, and I think those of us that are in cycling, you're always asking that question, how am I going to improve myself? Right? Is sitting on Instagram 4 hours a day improving yourself? These are the questions I would ask a lot of the juniors that would sit there and they bypass a nap to look at other people's lives. Like, I don't understand. But okay, if that's what you really want to do. But recovery is really important. I think that's the next slide. So recovery at this level, like Bill was talking about with intense efforts, that's cool. Okay. Go back. If you have intense efforts that you're not used to, then you're going to need more recovery. And by intense efforts, what I mean by that is, 2.5 hour, 3 hours race, normalized power, really, really high. And you come back to the hotel and you want to sit on Facebook, like you're hindering your recovery time. And so for juniors, it's really important because they're growing. You have to give them time. They need to recover. And you have to give them time to sleep. I think it's one back. I'm not sure though. That's fine. Go forward one. So with juniors, they tend to be, because they're young and they're developing and they're working on a lot of things, and insecurity levels are high. It's normal. We were all the same when we were young. You know what I mean? All of us will get a little bit of insecurity every now and then, even when we're older. When you're 17, 15, 16, 17, 18, it can be a lot worse, and it can be really heavy on them at times. So you want to work with them on their self-confidence at all times. All the things they're doing are good. Every pedal stroke is really good for tomorrow. But you have to remind them of that sometimes, because sometimes they just don't see it. It's a larger picture. You know, a lot of juniors will focus in on what's exactly right in front of them at the moment, and they forget that this is a process that takes a really, really long time. Cycling was told to me years ago by this Belgian coach, like, you're not going to see how a cyclist is going to be until 10 years from now, when they're 17, 15, 16. So that's really young. So 26, right? Well, it takes time. So maybe not 10 years, 10,000 hours. That's a huge debate. I don't really know. But whatever it is, it's a lot of kilometers. Let's put it that way. So these were some of the rules that I would work with because we're working with really, really high level athletes, even though they were really young. But these are the rules that we had in our van, in our house, in the team car, and everybody got a copy of this. And I stole this directly from Scott. I didn't make this up. I'm not that smart. I went to art school. But the first one is really important. We will respect one another and get each other's backs. We have each other's backs. That's really, really important. So if you have any juniors that are working in a big team or riding on a big team, like that's important for them to understand that kind of teamwork because that works for them in the long run. Because when you're at this level and you're racing, you may never know who your teammates are going to be 5 years from now, especially in the World Tour. It's dramatic. It's free agency, right? You see it all the time and you read it in cycling news. These riders move around all the time. Well, the guy that you hate might be your teammate in 2 years. So as a junior, it's really difficult to kind of explain that to them because like I said before, they just focus on what's here. But these are just an example of some of the stuff that I would work on. That's one of my favorite pictures up there. It's obviously the guys going 1, 2, 3. So that's Luke Lamperti, who was 4th the other day of the Tour of Britain. I used to coach him personally. That's Quinn Simmons, and that's Magnus Sheffield. We destroyed that race. That was a good day. Cool. Okay. Everybody wants to see what juniors are capable of doing, right? So this is a local kermesse. This is grassroots racing, the lowest level of racing that I would take the national team to in Belgium. This is a lot different than a 1 hour criterion. I don't know if those of you can see this, but it's kind of challenging to see. Where do you think the kid got away in the breakaway? Can you kind of see it? Right about there, right? But before that, holy jumpiness, right? Because it's, I don't know, 10 turns in the middle of wet Belgium, and then all of a sudden it steadied out. But normalized power for that day, so it was just under 2 hours, and I think it was 2:51, just about that. And the kid dropped 1,617 kilojoules. So that's a pretty good day, but that's like the basic level. A criterium in America is what? Junior criterium. 35 minutes long? Maybe you haven't raced one, yeah. 40 minutes long? Belgians are pretty good. That's like, they're doing that 3 times a week as a 17-year-old. Here's a good one. So this is a Nations Cup race, stage race, stage 1. You can see that pretty good day, 100K, 2,100 kJs. Training load is pretty high, which is similar to training peaks. 308 average normalized power, effectively, right? One of my favorite things is right down here, where he sprinted for 3rd. Kid's 17 years old, and he's putting out just under 1,500 watts after 2,100 kilojoules. So this is a conversation I have all the time. Bill had great slides up. Cipollini, 1,900 watts max sprint. Pataki was 1,800 watts, I believe. You know, somebody else up there. That's after 5,000 kilojoules. So a lot of kids can sprint. My question always to a lot of kids and a lot of coaches, can they sprint after 3,000 kg? Because that's what's important. So if you're training an athlete that's really, really good at sprinting, are you giving them sprints in the beginning of the workout or at the end? Okay. Because at the end, we'll make that. So here's an example of a really good day in Switzerland. Again, with Switzerland, because I love Switzerland. But here's one of the only times where 20-minute power comes into play for a junior. Every coach wants to give their athletes 20-minute power because they don't want to give them FTP tests. It's lazy coaching. Juniors do not need 20-minute power. This is the only time they need 20-minute power, when they're climbing a giant mountain in Switzerland. They have 25 minutes sustained. But really not often, because as you saw from the Kremes file that I had before, it's super jumpy, stochastic, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So what I was doing towards the later end of my career was focusing on athletes that had really good 1 minute, 5 minute, and 10-minute power. 20-minute power is really, really nice. Don't get me wrong. And it's really important, especially in America, where we have dead straight roads forever and ever and ever. And our time trials are that way, cone, and back. Yeah. That's a rarity, by the way. Like, not often do you have mountaintop finishes, but it's one of those races that we dominated for years because all our athletes are really good at 20-minute power. So on one hand, it was good, but on the other hand, they suffered at some of the other races that we did. So here's a good example of workload, the final sprint. You can see towards the end, so I have that highlighted section. So right there at the end, he's hitting 1,353 watts. So these are all juniors, they're young. I just wanted to show you what these guys are capable of doing. Thank you. That's a 2.1 race. That's a little bit lower than a Nations Cup race, but still a very, very high level race. And it's important to see that it's, oh, these are good. These are the best ones. Oh, leave that one. Okay, Quinn Simmons. Everybody wants to know about Quinn Simmons. Everyone always asks. He is an anomaly. He is a diamond in the rough. I cannot tell you what it was like to work with him. It was a challenge because he was so good and he could rip the team apart. So this is his world championship ride taken off of Strava. He gave me the file and I just couldn't process it fast enough. He actually gave me his real file. This is fine for what you guys want to see. But there's a reason why he went straight to the world tour. And if you look at that, that's 150K day, very, very up and down. And his normalized power was 355. And that's, yeah, just under 4,000 kgs of work. So for anyone that doubted that that is world tour. You add 2 hours on top of that, you add another 1,800 kgs, he can still do that. He sent me his file from Strada Bianchi, it would blow your mind before he crashed. So he's super, super talented. Now, not every junior is like this, obviously. I was fortunate and privileged enough to work with athletes like, oh, that's good. I'll leave that. Hey, you finally got there. That's great. Thanks, John. I was fortunate enough to work with an athlete like that, and it was a privilege. But it was also challenging because when you have someone that could work at that rate so high, and the other guys are not at that level, they need a couple of years, right? It's really, really challenging. But for all of them to buy into the teamwork that we had involved was really, really important and really, really crucial. For those of you who have never seen the junior men's road race from Harrogate, I recommend it. And it's not because I was in the team car crapping myself the entire day, because I knew that we were like, everyone told us we were going to win. Every director that I knew told us we were going to win. And I was like, please don't tell me that. But watch it, because it's a clinic. We put on a clinic. And by we, I mean the team. I was part of it. The mechanic was part of it. The Swanee was part of it. I was accused of having radios. The riders had radios. Junior racing, you're not allowed to use radios. And some other directors thought I had radios. That's how good they worked together. But they delivered Quinn a little bit early to when he probably should have attacked, but they delivered. Here's another good example, though. This is 2014. This is Logan Owen's file from World Championships from Luca. I believe it's Luca, or it could be Ponferrada. 2014. What was 2014? No, 2014 was Ponferrada. Sorry. It's a big day. It's just another big day. But this is the level of World Championships. Like, this was really, really high. And so you can see it's like, it's big power, it's big day. You know, this is, so normalized power, I believe this is Will Barda's file. Will Barda, those of you that don't know him, he is now on EF education, and he's probably, I don't know, what's 120 pounds, and he's probably like, what, 50 kilograms, you know, and his normalized power was 315. Like, yeah, it's a big day. But this is really high level. And this is what I just wanted to show you. So for those of you who don't believe that juniors can do stuff, which is pretty cool. So I think that's it. So a lot of people ask me, like, how do they train? How do they do this? And I'll get into that in a second, but it's a lot of kilometers. Quinn at one point, and Logan Owen and all these other riders that came through my program, like, you're skirting 20 hours a week as an 18-year-old. Now, I don't agree or disagree. It's hard for me to say because every athlete is much different. I used to have a slide. I had this picture of two kids behind a car in a caravan. So they were working their way back up through the race because of flat tires. And one was like a hobbit and one was 6 feet tall and he was Dutch. And my question to the group every year I give this talk in front of 60 coaches every single year, the best coaches in America. And I go, which one's 17? And it was a trick question. They were both 17-year-olds. Well, one looked like he was 30 and one looked like he just got out of grade school, which he probably did. So you have to tailor your training to these athletes depending on their physicality or their physical makeup in a way. Logan Owen when he was 18, he was balding and he had a full beard, right? So you can train him differently. Quinn Simmons obviously looked mountain man. He looks like he's 40. And he can handle a really heavy workload, but not every athlete can. And so you have to decide as coaches how to work with these athletes. And sometimes that's the art of it. As much data that's coming off a bike nowadays, you still have to look at the athlete. In Belgium, they would always ask me, like, oh, does he, the U23 teams would be like, oh, okay, we want to put him on the team, but does he look young? I was like, what is this from the 1970s? Like, does he look young? Like, what is this weird thing? And then I understood a little bit longer as I got longer into the job, like, I see what they're asking me. Sometimes it's lost in translation. My Flemish is not so good, but they're asking me, like, is he pudgy? Does he have baby fat? Does he look like he's 40? Does he look like he can develop? Because if you're taking at the upper levels, if you're looking at athlete development, you're improving around 3 to 4% a year. 4 maximum, right? So if your FTP, if your functional threshold power as a junior is 300, let's say, 18 years old, so 1900, at 19, what would you be? Theoretically, a little bit. Well, if you look at your 30, your functional threshold power is like 320, you're making really, really small gains, unless you're doing something radically poor. Right, so this is old, weird rule of thumb that the Belgians have, but in some ways it's kind of true. And that's where the art of coaching kind of comes in. So it really, really depends on the athlete. So a lot of people ask me, well, when you were coaching juniors, like, what would you give them? Well, Luke Lampredi was never more than like 14, 15 hours a week because he was a super fast sprinter. And by sprinter, what I mean by that is that he's a really slow, fast guy. Because a road sprinter is a really slow, fast guy. Because a track sprinter is a really fast guy. But he's not going to do it after 3,000 kgs. So it's just weird, it's a weird dynamic. Cavendish is a really fast, slow guy. Yeah, so anyway, so you just have to like step back a little bit and look at them and ask yourself, like, where are they in their development, which is going to take a little bit of art, to kind of see, but then push them. You do have to push them. And I think the best way to push them is to get them racing as much as possible. I came across a coach one time. I was working with this kid who was on the junior national team, and coach was like, well, I don't like my athletes racing too much. Wait, what? And she's like, oh no, training is much better than racing. I was like, timeout, yellow card. I'm like, every opportunity, and people talk about opportunities, a race is an opportunity. You're going to learn more from racing than you ever would by doing 2x20s by yourself up Kings Mountain. Guaranteed. I will guarantee. Because you're not learning how to use and to work in a caravan going up Kings Mountain. That's for sure. Although you're not going to learn how to use and work in a caravan unless you're in Europe anyway, because we have insurance problems here in this country. But yeah, it's really, really important to race as much as possible. It's the fastest way for development is racing. And kids want to be challenged. They want to race. They want to go fast. That's the most important thing. Obviously, to get to a race point, there's a point in their development you have to decide when it's the perfect time to race. If they're young, but you can start them young. The beginner program at Hellier is a perfect example. I cannot stress too much. Going to the velodrome is really important for athletes, for all athletes. I used to take kids through team pursuit camp all the time in Europe because it was cheaper for me to rent a velodrome than it was for me to rent a van in this country and drive to LA from NorCal with kids. I could fly them to Europe, drive half an hour to boot camp in Germany and have a team pursuit camp with 6 guys that are road cyclists that don't know anything about track. Literally knew nothing about track. Threw them on track bikes and we were doing team pursuits. By the end of the day, we probably would have won national championships with like a bunch of dudes that had never been on a track bike before. But they also learned skills. All those skills that you learn on the track that Bill was talking about, super, super important. I work with this athlete right now. He's based in Pennsylvania. He's a track sprinter. He's a track endurance rider. He races mountain bikes. He races cross. He races road. And he's like, coach, what do you think I should do? I was like, all of that. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, you're 15. Race all of that. I was like, do you have a BMX bike? He's like, no. I'm like, you should get one of those too. And he's like, are you kidding? I'm like, no. You're 15. This is fun. Well, I want it to be my job. Yeah. Wait for that. Trust me, that's coming. You know, kid's doing 1,800 watt sprints as a 15-year-old. He looks like a footballer on wheels. I'm not kidding. He's massive. I was like, are you Dutch? He's like, no, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm like, okay. But yeah, but it's fun for him. Everything is fun. I crashed on my cross bike. Coach, I crashed. How do you do? I didn't break anything. Yeah, you're good. Just keep going. He's awesome. He's a great kid. But he wants to be professional. And it's like, okay, but that takes a long, long time. And he is like far from there. But he's on his way because he's racing as much as possible. So do that. Any questions from anybody about anything? Yeah.
You said working with Simmons was really hard. What were the top reasons why?
He is extremely hard-headed. He is extremely left brain. He's a genius at chess. Not kidding. Mathematician and overcalculates a lot of things. And he would take slights personally. Yeah, and then when you're young and when you're insecure, and it was hard to work with him. And so I was really fortunate to go through a couple of USOC programs that I worked. You learn about working with people, a little bit about psychology, and I learned the things I could say to him and the things I could not say. And I had to sit down with the team, and we had a lot of team meetings with all 6 of us together, and we would literally sit around and talk about our feelings, just to get things out in the open. Because if we didn't talk about that, they would tear the team apart. And knowing what we were going for, and this was at Roubaix. All this stuff started happening at Roubaix because there was a lot of pressure from a lot of people that he was going to win Roubaix. From a company in Morgan Hill to his parents, to my boss, to everyone around. Yeah. And when you're 18 years old, dealing with that kind of pressure is really, really tricky. And then when you have a teammate slip off the front, literally just slip off the front because the Danes decided to let him go, he looked at it as though my teammate attacked me. I'm in the car listening to the radio and I'm like, he rode off the front. But I had to talk him down off that ledge. He's a great kid, don't get me wrong. Every athlete is problematic in their own way. Every athlete's a little bit mental. You know, it's just the way it is. Life, everyone's a little bit mental. Like everyone will fixate on a thing and not let it go. And he fixated on that, and it literally took me 6 months to get him to trust the team, to deliver him at Harrogate. All the gray hair that I have is like on my face is Quinn Simmons. Yeah, but I love him. I love him to death. And there's a moment in a coaching career that caps everything. And I'll tell you guys the story. So I told it yesterday to somebody recently. Yesterday was pretty recent. Sorry, that was redundant. After Harrogate, so the junior women had won. Megan Jastrab had won Worlds as well. Quinn had won Worlds. And I was walking back from downtown Harrogate with my wife, and all the kids were outside an ice cream shop. And I was like, oh. So I went in. I'm like, I'm buying. All the kids were like, oh my God, you caught us eating ice cream. I'm like, caught you. I'm like, I'm buying you ice cream. All of you deserve ice cream. And Quinn looks at me and just starts crying. He's like, this is it, isn't it? And I said, yeah, this is it. Enjoy this. Because it goes away tomorrow. As soon as you're on the plane, it goes away. But here's a kid who's very attuned to what's going on. Very attuned. And that was probably the best moment of my coaching career. That final moment. But it was, yeah, it took a lot of work, man. Like, he's a beast. But, you know, I text him like, hey, man, how's the wealthy? He's like, holy crap, it's hilly here. You know, it's like, he's that kind of kid too, because he's a kid. You know, he's 19 years old and all that. And yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm sure everyone has read about all the stuff he said, and he's made some really stupid mistakes. And we talked about that too. And he's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said anything. Nope, probably shouldn't have, but okay, here we are. So what are you going to do? You know, but yeah, is he talented? Oh my God. Like, watch out for Worlds and watch out for Revenge. That's all I got to say with that kid. But there's other kids like him. Magnus, that kid is no joke. Blevins is, yeah, he went to the Olympics for mountain biking, like super, super talented. Won a Nations Cup stage race on the road as an 18-year-old. No one remembers that stuff. You know, I do. I remember what they were like when Mateo is like this big and he's super skinny. He has no idea what he's doing. And his all elbows and knees, and he's racing his bike. And now I see him at Tour Britain, and I'm like, look at that kid. Yeah. But you have to give them these opportunities. I think working with juniors, that's the most important thing I can impress with any of you that end up working with juniors or start working with juniors or coaching juniors. Let them race, get them to races as best you can, and let them develop on their own and help them as best you can. Don't grab them by the neck and move them. You have to put them into a stream like a fish. Just do this. Literally, I'm telling you, because it's, you tell a 17-year-old kid, what, especially a 17-year-old boy, what to do, and he's going to look at you like, nope. But you show him the right way. So yeah. Any other questions about anything?
Hey, Billy, I got a question on the phone.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, two-part question. This is Mark.
Hey, Mark.
What's USA Cycling? What's USA Cycling doing now? If you, with you not in the program, and then for kids that can't do that, you know, either don't make it or it's inconvenient. What's the next best path? Domestic path.
Yeah, great question. So what are they doing now? Nothing. They haven't done a national team trip in 2 years. I hear they're really in the hole, and the Olympics are expensive. But that's a longer discussion, probably over beers, Mark, because I have a lot to say about that. But the next step. So I believe with all my heart that collegiate cycling is a fantastic pathway to a lot of things. I love their point structure, how they work, how they operate. You have to, the top level has to support, is it ABCD, I believe, or something like that? Like, everyone has to support each other. And so I truly believe that collegiate cycling is fantastic. Now, where that goes and how that develops is really dependent on all the middlemen involved in racing, which is really what all of cycling is, dependent on middlemen. We don't have a lot of road races anymore, as well, you know, Mark, like all those races that we did are gone. So I don't really know. I also think that gravel is a fantastic opportunity. For younger riders, it's a really tricky thing. And I had this long discussion with someone who's running a fantastic gravel event, and she wanted to know how to get more juniors in the race. And I said, well, you cannot have a 200-mile gravel race for juniors. 100K, you know, give or take, depending on how hard it is, like that's a perfect opportunity, because I started looking at files and I started looking at things. And I think that anything right around 3 hours for 17, 18-year-old is really, really good. And that's going to show you what they're capable of doing. Now, it's a lot of steady state power, Mark, and I don't really know how that's going to translate yet over to Europe. That's a question for much later, but I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, great answer. Thanks, Billy.
Anybody else? I feel like I've been talking for like 5 hours. No? Yeah.
I was going to try one. Where do you think the real hotbeds are right now in the US for young cyclists? And do you think that that fits in with where the best racing is?
So the question was, where are the hotbeds in US right now? And how does that fit in? Sorry, second part.
Is it just, do you think it's partly because that's where the racing is?
Yeah, so when I started looking, I got accused often of, I'm only taking people from the West. And I think, so let me go back. So I think you missed it. There are about, at any given time, 17, 18-year-old juniors in this country, there's like 350 that race, right? At one point, a third of them were in SoCal. So how could I discount that entire demographic that has a number of races that they're doing just to take a kid from Vermont that did one stage race that one time, right? So that for me was really tricky, and talent ID and talent selection was always really tricky. I was not going to be everybody's friend. I was very aware of that. I was going to piss people off. But my question to everyone that would always, I know this is going to sound like a really insecure and snide answer, but my question to someone that always said, why did you take that kid and not this kid? And I was like, well, who would you take off? Who would you remove from that team to put your athlete? That was always my question. Who would you take off the team? And you see it, I don't know if those of you that follow Olympic selection and stuff like that, like people would arbitrate all the time to get on teams. And I had this discussion this year with someone, and I said, you're going after one person. So you have to state your case that that person doesn't deserve to be there and you deserve to be on. That's a really, really tricky thing. So yes, to answer your question, there's a lot of races in SoCal. Now, do those races translate all the time to Europe or to a higher level? No, not all the time, but they're racing. And so if you're looking at a kid that has like 30 race days by June, compared to someone that has 8, that's a tough, like that's really tough for me, especially when you're going up against Belgian kids that have 60 by June. So Belgium, as an example, like Belgium is an anomaly. It's obviously Belgium. They're the best at what they do. They have 1,200 17, 18-year-old juniors to choose from. I talked to the national team coach at length, and he's like, that's really challenging. And he would look at me and he's like, you're easy. You don't have that many kids. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, it's a trade-off. Yeah, you have 1,200 kids to choose from, and there's so many races, like he can't even keep up. For me, it was relatively easy. At one point I made these, I made these selection races, right? So it was really, really simple. It cut down on parents asking me questions in a way. But it was, if you won the race, you went to Europe. So I had 3 at one point. I had Battenkill on the East Coast. We had Valley of the Sun. We had the San Dimas road race stage in San Dimas. If you won the road race stage, you went, because that was really close to 3 hours. And it was, what I was trying to do was get races that were closest enough to Europe in terms of load. But then you also got Valley of the Sun had, one year they had 90 juniors go to Valley of the Sun. It was the biggest field. But it took years to get to that point, right? And now I don't know what they're doing. Now they're looking at Strava. Don't get me started. Christine, what are you gonna say?
I was going to ask if we have track programs.
What track program?
When there was track racing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's Star Track. There's Star Track out of Casino, where I started. So to go back to track racing, I was a Cat 1 on the track and a Cat 4 on the road at one point, because I love track racing so much. So track racing for sure would develop athletes, without a doubt. There are a lot of good athletes coming from Star Track. The issue is socioeconomical. Bike racing becomes prohibitively expensive at one point or at some point in everybody's career, because one of the reasons what makes our country great also hurts us in cycling. It's big. It's really, really big, and it becomes challenging to travel. So yeah, if Rafa could give money to anybody, they should give money to track programs, but they should also, in my opinion, that's just my humble opinion, I know they give money to Star Trek for sure, but I wish that they would build a velodrome in Fayetteville, an indoor velodrome that's world class, that could be used for World Cups, because all the athletes that I would come across in Belgium and France and Germany, all the young kids, I would Dutch, because they all speak English, which is great. I'd ask them, how'd you get into cycling? I'd ask the Euros. Oh, I saw the Tour de France. I saw the Tour of Flanders. I saw the Tour of Germany. I saw this. What are our athletes seeing here? Nothing. Those levels and those moments of inspiration are so important to a young athlete. I cannot put enough value on that. It's so important. There was one year where Tour of Flanders came right through the Belgian town that we were staying in. And after breakfast, I walked all the guys down. Now this is like early on in the race and they're just cruising. But of course there was already a break that was like 10 minutes up the road, because that's Belgium. But we all went down and we watched. And the entire town came out. And all these kids are waving little Flanders flags. And to this day, those kids that were on that trip email me and like, that was the greatest day I've ever, that was amazing. And they were like, that was amazing. We saw the Tour of Flanders. And then we went back home, we watched the whole thing on TV. 7 hours of the Tour of Flanders was on television. You're gonna tell me that's not an inspiration? Holy moly. So why do you think we have so many basketball, baseball, and football players in this country? It's not complicated. It's really not. So if any of you know promoters, push them. We need more road racing. We don't need another 40-minute criteria. So, yeah. I could go on and on. Anything else? Anybody from the peanut gallery on Zoom? Jerome, you're not heckling me? I'm really disappointed. I thought for sure. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.